And we're going to do a little bit of programming today. It'll mostly be building and a little bit of wiring, a little bit of programming. Last week, we made a phone mount that can go on to our zipline robot. So if you were able to make that and print that, you'll actually be able to attach it to your zipline and have it take pictures for you, which is kind of cool. So to start, I'm going to go ahead and take this robot down and give you a better picture, a better look at what's actually involved. So change cameras real quick. All right. So this is the robot that we're going to be building. It's got a square frame, some electronics on the inside, and a motor up top. And using these components, it is able to move back and forth. 2 sessions ago, in the Intro to Robotics lesson, we talked about how motors work, what an Arduino does, and how a battery powers that. So today, we're really going to be applying a lot of those lessons in a more practical way to make a zipline robot. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So the kit that we're going to be using is the Moorebot base kit. So you can find this on Makershed. Don't worry if you don't have one. Today you can just watch along, and this is going to be recorded and uploaded later, so you'll be able to follow along and watch us at a later date if you'd like. But for now, feel free to ask questions as we're going through the build. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up, and we'll see that there's a few different bags of parts in here, and we'll use them at different stages. So I'm going to go ahead and put this box to the side. All right, so we got a bunch of fun stuff here. To start, we've got a battery, some structural 3D printed parts, some motion-related 3D printed parts, as well as electronics. So we've got our motors, some encoders in here, as well as a few other goodies. Dowels, can't live without those. Those are great. And then more electronics. So we're going to start today by building the square frame. So if we look at our robot, it's got this sort of square frame, and we're just going to start there, and then we'll add on the electronics and all the other fun stuff. So for this, all we need is our parts bag and our dowels bag. I'm going to set everything else to the side, and we're going to get started. So I'm going to open up this parts bag, and just go ahead and dump everything out. We'll sort it in a minute. All right, so what I want are these little parts right here. They're blue, they kind of look like a square. These are called end connectors. So think of it as like the Lego brick of this Moorebot ecosystem. They can be used to build all kinds of cool structures, and it just starts with these really simple parts. So let's get to building. So to start, we're going to separate out all of the end connectors from the other parts. So there's a few of the little pieces, and we're just going to go ahead and take those. And these are corners and 90-degree mounts. We're going to go ahead and put those in the bag. So we will save those for a later date. But actually, go ahead and save out. I was wrong. I forgot. Go ahead and save the corners. So these little corners we're going to keep, and everything else we will put back up. So the little red parts and the tiny blue pieces we'll put back. There we go. All right. So the core of everything you build with Moorebot usually involves the small assembly. What we're going to do is we're going to take 4 wooden dowels and 2... Oh, hey, everybody in the chat. Greetings from Russia. Awesome. Glad you're watching. I hope you enjoyed this. If any of you have questions while we're building, please feel free to ask. I love to talk about this stuff, so I'm happy to answer any questions. Anyways, so we're going to grab 2 of these little blue pieces, these end connectors, and 4 wooden dowels, and you're going to snap a wooden dowel in the arm of the blue piece. So we're just going to add all 4 of these. They should just snap right in. So now we have 1/2. And then we're going to take the other part and snap it on the other side. So just slip it in right there and snap it in. There we have a complete part. So if we look on our zip line, hi, Joseph. Hi, Payal. Thanks for watching. So if you look on the zip line, you'll notice a lot of these parts look just like this. In fact, we're going to need to make 8 total of these. So we'll go ahead and just make those really quickly. So here's our first one. Got to put these corners to the side. And I'll go ahead and dump out my dowels. And the kit comes with extra dowels, so don't worry if you break a dowel or lose a dowel. There's more than enough there. So I'm going to try to do this really quickly. In the meantime, if anybody has any robotics-related questions, let me know, and I'm happy to answer them. This will take just a second. So some little tips as I kind of do this. You'll notice that these parts aren't exactly symmetrical. So it's a little bit wider in this direction, right? They only open up in one way. So the reason for that is that it allows you to create these sub-assemblies and snap them together really easily. But when you're building these sort of like end connector assemblies, there's two ways that you could do it. You could do it like this, where the up is facing the same side on both of them, or you can do it where it's facing a different direction. And I like to advise people to make them face the same direction, because later on, if you're wanting to take something apart, it makes it a lot easier. So yeah, so this is how you want it to look, everything in the same direction. So I'm going to keep making those. I might grab some from off my desk. We don't have to wait here the whole time while I make these. You always want to make sure that the dowels are just flush in there on the edge of the end connector to make sure you can just push down on a table and it'll take care of it. All right, so we've got 4 down. I'll go ahead and make the next kind of simple structure before we make the rest. So we've got our 4 end connectors units. We've got more of these. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to grab 4 corners. So what type of programming code? So somebody asked what type of programming codes they need to learn for Arduino. Arduino uses a variant of C++. In today's video, I'm going to show you how to program, make a really small code, but first of all, how to get started with Arduino. So that's a great question. We're going to get to that in a little bit. So we're going to take our end connectors, and we're just going to insert this corner inside the part right there. We're going to do that for all 4 of them until we have a little square. So then we'll put the last 2 corners in the final piece, and we'll put that in. Nice, quick, and easy. Things should just fit in there. It should be a little bit snug, but you can still pull it out if you try. So that's the first square. Next, what we're going to do is make the second square. So I'll set that to the side. All right, and then I've got a few more of these parts just kind of sitting on my desk, so I'm just going to go ahead and grab those. But when you build them, you'll need to make them. All right. So now we have all of the parts we need. So we're going to have 4 total of these again, and we're just going to make another square. So we've got 4 more corners over here, and we will insert them in the end connector inside that little square right there. All right, there we go. Almost. Spoke a little bit too soon. I forgot to put the last part in. Okay, so now we have 2 squares. Next, we're going to connect them together. So for this, we need 4 of these end connectors. So the first 4 are going to go right on the very edge of this, right there. So go ahead and put 1 more. So we'll put 2 of them on there. And then on the opposite side, you're going to do the same thing. So we'll put it, make sure it's flush right up against the edge of the other one. And we're going to do that on the other side too. So here we go. That's all you need to do. There should be just 2 or 4 of them on these sides, if you can see that. Hi there. Today we're building a zipline robot. It's going to end up looking like this in a little bit. And you can make it go on any kind of paracord zip line, and our phone mount will attach to it. Okay, so I've added those snaps. Let's see if you can see that right there. Next, what I'm going to do is add the second square. So we're just going to take this and drop it on top. And sometimes you have to kind of like line up those snaps. But once you do, just push down, snap them in. All right. So you should have 4 things snapped in all together, and it should be pretty sturdy. So we've got our part there. Now, one little trick that I'll show you, this will hold itself together pretty well. But if you want it to where it just physically cannot come apart, what you can do is take a wooden dowel and insert it into this hole using pliers. So I'm not going to do that now. I'm just going to take a bit of time to do it on all of them. But if you wanted to do that, you would just take your pliers and insert it in that hole and push down. And then that creates it where it just can't come apart. But for most projects, you don't need to do that. But if you ever find yourself needing to make sure it's sturdy, you can do just that. All right, so now we have the frame. And if we look at our robot, they're looking pretty similar. Next, what we need to do is add the electronics. So this is where it gets kind of cool. I'm going to put our frame aside for a second, and we're going to grab our electronics bag. So here's the electronics bag. It has Arduinos, wires, programming cables, Bluetooth modules, sensors, all kinds of cool stuff. We're just going to get into the very surface stuff today. So the first thing we're going to pull out is the Arduino. Next, what we need is the programming cable, the blue USB cable. And we're going to go ahead and pull out our wires too. So after that, the last little bits we'll need, it's a bag with Velcro and screws in it, as well as this little gray mount, this other little gray mount, and then all of the blue parts. These blue little snap mounts. So, and then I'll go ahead and put the rest back. So your breadboard and these right here are little breadboard mounts, but we won't need that because we're not going to use the breadboard today. If you wanted to add more wires and stuff, you could use that later. And we're going to go ahead and put our sensors and Bluetooth module back inside. All right. So we've got our bag of stuff. First, let's talk about what all this is. To start, we have an Arduino Uno. We talked about this a bit last week. On the top of this Arduino is a motor shield. A motor shield, it allows us to program motors to go a specific speed, or really a percentage of their maximum speed. So yeah, we've got that. Programming cable, that's what's going to connect our computer to the Arduino, allow us to program it, and then battery and stuff. So let's start by attaching the Arduino to the Arduino mount. So this is the Arduino mount. It's got all the little pins here and the holes. These little edges right here, we talked last week about how to design those, and they allow you to insert snap mounts so that you can snap this onto the platform. So if you put 2 of these snap mounts on, you can then snap it onto your robot, right? But for right now, we need to actually attach the Arduino to this. So we're going to get our Arduino. We're going to get this little bag right here, and inside our motors bag is a screwdriver. If you just pull this out right here, this little screwdriver that we're going to get out, it's going to be useful for this. So here's our tiny screwdriver. Just going to go ahead and seal this back up, put it in our motors bag, and we'll use that in a minute. So we've got our screwdriver. We're going to pull out of this little bag 2 long screws and 2 nuts. So these are M3 nuts and bolts. And what we're going to do is line up on our Arduino and Arduino mount. I'm going to line these holes up just a little bit so we see that these line up. And we're going to put in the long screws. So the first long screw, if we're looking at the USB hub right here, the first long screw is going to go in right to the left. So kind of got to fiddle with it, but there we go. It's in there. Oh. It's at a bit of an angle. Here, we'll go ahead and use the other one. So I'm going to use that one right there. Oh, one sec. Okay, yeah. And then we're going to take our screw and we're going to put it in the other hole. Right through there. Should come out on the end. This one's being a little bit weird. I don't know why. It seems like they drilled this hole just a little bit off, which means this doesn't fit in just right. Hey, Rex. Can I get your help for 1 sec? All right, so while Rex gets me that, I'm going to go ahead and assemble this. Well, the other part. Actually, we'll come back to this. So, oh, there he is. Rex is speedy. Here's another Arduino. That's the first one I've ever seen do that. So I'm going to have to look into that later. That's interesting. Okay, so here we have an Arduino with a hole in the right spot. And we can see that that screw just goes right through there, as well as, oh, I left the screw in here. There it is. So here we have our other screw, and we're going to put that in on the far end right there. So you should have 2 screws kind of sticking in on the bottom here. And we are going to line up the Arduino. So the first hole goes in right there. Second hole goes in right there. It may have been kind of hard to see that on the camera. Basically, there's only one way it really fits and works out right. You should see the holes line up. So just test it until that works, basically. So then we're going to kind of screw these screws in to the plastic. And it should thread the plastic just a little bit, but we also have nuts that will allow you to secure it just a little bit more, so that it won't ever fall off. And I'm going to go ahead and screw in the other one. All right, so we've got our M3 bolts sticking through the Arduino there and the part, and I'm going to go ahead and attach the nuts. So we'll go righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. We're going to go right and attach those, and they don't have to be on super tight, just kind of firm with your fingers. It'll be fine. So yeah, there is our Arduino mount. Next, what we're going to do is add in our snap connectors. So they're just going to slip on the little edges right there. There we go. Now this can be added to the frame. So I'm going to set that to the side for a second. And now we're going to talk about the battery. So the battery comes in this little baggie. This is a 12-volt lithium-ion battery. They last for a really long time, so you don't have to recharge them that much. When you get your battery, I like to go ahead and advise to just test it real quick. So plug it in, make sure it lights up. If it doesn't light up, that just means your battery needs to be charged. So we include a charger in the kit. And additionally, if you look at your charger, the charger has the same connector as the Arduino. So you can either plug in your battery and charge that, or you can actually plug your Arduino right into the wall using the exact same charger. So if you ever have a project that doesn't need to move any, you can just plug it on the wall and never have to worry about batteries, which is pretty cool. So let's talk about how we're going to add this battery. We have this little part right here called the battery mount. And the battery mount uses a Velcro strip to attach the battery to the frame. So we're just going to unroll this little strip here. Cool stuff. And then what we're going to do is feed that through the slots right here. So we're going to pick one slot, feed the Velcro through, should come out the bottom, and we're going to put it in the other slot. So now it should look just like this. Get lots of angles there. All right, and it just wants to wrap up. So what we're going to do is drop our battery in. There we go. So the battery just sits in just like that. Actually, I'm going to flip it out so that you see, make sure that you see the text on the top. All right, so here's our battery, and I'm just going to go ahead and feed this back through and tighten it all over it. It doesn't have to be extremely tight, just enough that it's not going to fall out. So there we have our Velcro, and you can see it's going to be really sturdy. And then with the battery mounts, the same thing. We use snap mounts to attach that battery to the frame. So works just like that. So yeah, then we have kind of the basics of the electronics. What we need to do next is to go ahead and put them on the frame. I'm going to go ahead and put the cable and the wires to the side, but we will use these in a little bit. All right, so we're going to grab our square frame that we built just a little bit ago. Good stuff, good stuff. And we're going to orient it like this. So what you should see is, remember how we only put connecting in connectors like in the middle on two sides? Those two sides should be the top and the bottom. So if you look at it from the side, there'll be a part missing between right here and right here. But if you rotate it 90, that part will be there. That one right there. So these two right here, they need to be in the bottom. All right. It's okay if it's not exactly like this. It'll be fine. But this is just kind of a good practice to be in. It'll make it a little bit stronger, and you'll see why in a little bit. So what we're going to add next is our battery and Arduino. So the Arduino is actually going to go on the very far side. So we're going to face it this way. I don't know if you can really see it, but it'll go on the middle rail, which means between this one and this one, and it'll just snap on right there. So we'll snap it on now that it is on. We're remembering that this is the top. The next thing we're going to add is our battery. So the battery, you want to make sure that the leads that will plug in are right next to the actual plug. So what I like to do is go ahead and plug in the battery. It should light up. And then what we're going to do is snap that battery onto the frame. So I'm just going to add it right here. And you want to get it as close to the center as possible, but you want to make sure there's not too much strain on the cable. So that frame is on there. I've snapped the battery on. Everything is secure. We're good to go to the next stage. So fun stuff. I'm going to go and unplug my battery so we don't lose any battery power. And next, we are going to pull out the motor bags. This is the last little bag we have to work with. I'm going to set this to the side. Let's just go ahead and dump this out and see what we got. All right, so we have a lot of fun stuff here. To start, we have these little yellow DC motors. So these motors are really quite powerful for how small they are. They can go very fast, so they're fun little motors. We have some people saying hi from Brazil. Hello, how's it going? All right, so the things that we need out of this, because there's a lot of stuff here that can be used for other projects, but for this specific build, we're just going to use one motor. We're going to use one of these little parts. We call these bearings. They've got a little round hole in them, and you'll see how they're used in a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and set that to the side. I'm going to take two of these little snap connectors, set those to the side. And I'm actually going to take two more, set them somewhere else because we're going to use them separately. We want one wheel, and then we want one motor mount. So you've got two motor mounts here. They look like these little square things. The way these work is the motors just slip inside, right, like that. But you'll notice on the top, there's two different things. So one says L, and has an arrow, and one says R, and has an arrow going the other way. So this stands for right and left. Somebody in the chat asked how much the kit costs. The kit is $150 in the Maker Shed. So let's take the right motor mount. We're going to set that to the side. And then everything else, actually, sorry, misspoke. We're going to go ahead and take the end connectors as well. So all the end connectors from that kit we're going to set to the side. And then everything else we can just use in a separate, or we can put aside. And go ahead and save this little baggie here. We're going to use that in a second. So I'm going to put the rest back in my bag, save them for when we build another robot. Also, these little baggies here, these little sensors, these are encoders. They allow you to tell precisely where the motor is. So you'll notice there's like a little channel right here on the side of the motor mount. These encoders slide into that channel and let you measure the speed of these motors. Great. So here we have a motor and a motor mount. I'm going to go ahead and slip this motor into the motor mount. So we've got the right arrow facing that way, and the motor's just going to slip in right here. So the motor has this little red part right here on it, this little hub. It should be facing the opposite direction of this little lip here. So back here, it should be blank. Normally there's a little wheel that goes on there if you're using the encoder. And then on this side, we have our motor mount. So next what we're going to do is take our end connectors, and we're going to build a small little end connector assembly. So we're just going to go snap right there, there, and there. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side. So somebody asked if the parts are 3D printed and if you can find the part files. So yes, the parts are 3D printed, and you can find the part files on our community platform called MakerPlace. I can send a link in the chat in a little bit, and I'll also show you all where you can find tutorials. So on MakerPlace, you can find tutorials for this as well as part files. And we're probably going to be releasing this on Thingiverse really soon. So we've made our little end connector thing. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take our motor and we're going to snap it on. But we're going to try to make the center hub kind of in the center. So like right here would be too far, right here would be too far. We want it right close to the center. It doesn't have to be exact, but we want it pretty close. And you just push in on the other side right there and it'll snap in. There we go. So now that motor is on real quick. Next, what we're going to get out is our little bag. It's got tiny dowels and some screws in it. So inside this tiny bag, what I want is 4 of these little dowels. We also want 2 of these small screws. That's all that we're going to need today from this. So it's got these 4 dowels. So the way that rotation works in the Moorebot ecosystem is basically all the shafts are made out of 4 dowels. So if you put 4 wooden dowels together, it forms a square. And that square will insert into different parts. So now we have a shaft that can rotate, and that fits inside the bearing. So that just kind of gives you a basic idea of how all this plays together. So to start, what I'm going to do is take our 4 little dowels, and I'm going to kind of form them into a square in my hand. So now we've got this square. Let's see if you can see it. Yeah, it doesn't have to be exact. We'll make it right in a second. I'm going to take that, and I'm going to insert it into that hub right there. So you might have to play around with it a little bit, but it should fit in and be a little bit of a friction fit. So there we have it in that hub. And next what we're going to do is we're going to take these screws and we're going to add them to either side. So if you'll notice on the hub, see if you can see it, there's a hole right there. And there's also 4 holes all the way around it. So what we're going to do is put our first screw in. And I suggest kind of tightening it in with your hand just a little bit initially, so it stays in there. And then we're going to screw it in. I'll go ahead and remove this so you can see it. So just to give you a better picture. So there's our screw. And we're going to screw it in, but we're not going to screw it in all the way. We're going to leave about 1/4 inch exposed still. So you should see, if you look at it right there, you should see a little bit of it left. Now I'm going to just rotate that all the way around. And on the opposite side, I'm going to do the same thing. So I'll take this one off too, so you can see better. So there's a screw down on the bottom there, and now we're going to add a screw to the top. So I'm just going to hand thread that a little bit, and then I'm going to tighten it down. So again, we're not going to tighten this all the way. You're going to tighten it until it feels a little bit tough. So if you tighten it too much, what you'll see is these little dowels kind of spread out. That's not what we want. We want them to be secure. So you should be able to pull on those dowels just a little bit, and they won't fall out. Once you can do that, that's how you know that it's tight enough. So next what we're going to do, we're going to go and pull these dowels off like I did, and we're going to add our wheel. So the wheel is just going to slip in right on like that. You should be able to turn the motor with the wheel, and the dowels will turn with it. Nothing slipping, it's all just kind of secure. Now the wheel can still move back and forth, but we're about to fix that. So now we're going to take those 2 dowels, and we're going to snap them back in place. So there should be a little bit of clearance between the dowel and the wheel, so you can still turn the wheel just fine. So we do that, and we're stuck with this little assembly. Now, what we're going to do is take this little red bearing, and we're going to snap on we're going to add on the snap connectors. So the snap connectors need to face the same way as the bearing. So you'll notice the bearing is not symmetrical. There's one side that's flat and one side that's kind of sticking up. So the snaps should face the same way as the side that's sticking up, just like that. So I'm going to do that on both sides. So this is what we get, this little snap connector part. And this is actually going to snap on right here. So what we're going to do is line up the bearing with the shaft. So we want this to be very in line, and it should just kind of go right on. Once that's in line, we're just going to push down on the snap connectors, and there you have it. So now what we have is a little unit with a motor and a wheel that's well supported. So if we didn't have this bearing here, what you would see is the shaft would torque upwards. So if you had a bunch of weight on it, it would lean, and that makes it kind of inefficient. So that's why we have these little bearings here. They make it a lot more smooth. Okay, so now we have this assembly. Let's go ahead and add it to our device. So we're going to go ahead and add one more thing too. What you need to do is take just a wooden dowel, and we're going to add it right to the end of this, right here. So it should line up just like the other ones. It shouldn't be off-centered. And you're going to get this little assembly like this. So it'll just snap in right there. It's the only really place left to snap. So this is the final assembly going into it. Next, we are going to take our frame, and we're going to flip it to where the Arduino is closest to you. So here's your Arduino. It's close to me. And when I put this on, sorry, backwards. There we go. The arrow should be facing away from you. So it should look just like this. And what we're going to do is, let me drop something. We're going to take two end connectors, and we're going to add these end connectors on the very top of our frame. So this is the top upwards right here, batteries in the very bottom. We're just going to snap them on. Oh, actually, sorry, not right there. I was wrong. We need to snap them on right here in the leftmost. So not in the middle, but the one on the left. We're going to snap those two on. And next, what we're going to do is we're going to take our motor assembly that we just made. And we're going to make sure that the arrow is facing away from us. So this arrow right here should be facing away. You should have a little dowel right here. And we're just going to snap it on right there. So we're going to add it onto those end connectors. So here we have our two end connectors that we just added. Let's see if we can angle it more. We're just going to snap it on. And we want it to be centered. So this is not what we want. We don't want it to be angled. We want it to be right there in the middle. Because closer in the middle is going to better account for our center of mass. And so we're just going to snap that in. So all the parts are snapped in. Good stuff. And now we have most of it done. So the last little bit that I'm going to show you is if we take these two little snap connectors, what we can do is snap them on right here. Let's see if you can see. What these are used for is basically retaining it on the string. So I'm going to change my camera and show you something real quick. So here I have my little zipline chair. If I just take my robot and I place it on the zipline, what you'll notice is it's possible for it to fall out. If it like swings a lot, it could like fall down, right? So ideally what we have is something that retains it on there, but is quick and easy to add. So that's what these are. These little snaps will come in right here and hold on the frame. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the other camera so that you can see a better view of how we attach that. So here we are. So yeah, what we're going to do is just add the snap between these two parts right here. And we're going to add two of them. You could probably get away with one, but I think two is a little bit better. It's just going to be a little bit stronger. So there we have it, right there, both sides. And what we'll do when we want to add this onto our string is you're just going to unsnap the top of it and then lean them out like that. So if you have a string, and if this dowel was a string, it should be able to just slip in right under there, and now it can hold it, and then you can just add these afterwards, and then now it's secure and not going to fall off. So if the robot becomes dislodged from the wheel on the string, it's not going to fall and break. It's going to stay secure. So that is all done. Just wire it up. So what we're going to do is find our wires from earlier. And what we're looking for is two wires that have a not pointy end on one end and a pointy end on the other. So these are called jumper wires, and you'll see these little metal parts. So I'm just going to tear off two of these wires. It doesn't really matter the color. You can use any one you want. So one end's pointy, one end's not pointy. If you wanted to, you could plug them into themselves, just like that. But we're not going to do that because that wouldn't help us that much. Anyways, so what we're going to do is we're going to turn our robot on its side, and we're going to find our wires. Let's go this way. Here's our wires that are a part of our motor. So what we're going to do is we're going to plug the pointy end of the wire into the not pointy end of the jumper cable. If you can, try to match the color. It'll just make life a little bit easier when we go to wire it later. But it ultimately doesn't really matter much. So we're just going to go ahead and plug those wires in. Should be kind of tough to get it in, so it'll be secure. We're going to do that for both of them. So now what we've essentially done is lengthened our wire, which is really helpful because our Arduino is kind of far away. So next what we're going to do is I'm actually going to pop off the Arduino. And what's cool is that's kind of really quick and easy to do. We're going to take our screwdriver from earlier, and we're going to loosen some of these terminals. So these little green things right here are called terminals. They're used all over in all kinds of things. Basically, they allow you to attach a wire to a board in a way that's really secure, but you can like take it on and off if you want. So on this, there are little letters, and we'll see if you can see them. Maybe not super well, but so let's see if I can get it to focus. Maybe not. Anyways, so right here it says M4, and right here it should say M3. There are a total of 5 screws on each one of these terminals. There's 2 main terminals that we care about. When you see a number, so there's M4 down here, right beside this one, that corresponds to the 2 edge terminals. So, you don't have to kind of understand this fully. This is kind of, I'm maybe not doing a great job of explaining it. The tutorials that we have on our website show how to use each terminal and like which one is exactly which, if that makes sense. So what I'm going to do is just unscrew the 2 on the edge right here. So this is on the edge that is opposite of the USB. So we've got a USB here, there's a little terminal by it, and on the other side, we're going to take and unscrew the 2 screws on the very far edge. And what we're going to do is we're going to take our wires, and the wire that was connected to the black wire on the motor, we're going to plug in to the second one. And the wire that was connected to the red one on the motor, we're going to plug into the first one. So let's start with the one that was the red. So here I have, mine goes from red to white. I'm going to plug that white one in right here. So it should slip in right there. And then I'm going to plug the black one in right beside it. And then we're just going to take our screwdriver and screw down these terminals. So we're going to tighten this until it feels snug. So you should feel a little bit of resistance. Don't over tighten it. So you don't need to be Superman to tighten it down. You can just kind of do it lightly. But you just want to make sure that it's enough that if you give it a little tug, it's going to stay. As long as it passes the tug test, you're going to be fine. Make it a little bit tighter. Cool. So now that's wired up. I'm just going to go ahead and snap this Arduino back where it was on the robot. So make sure that's good and secure. Everything's strong on there. Perfect. We'll go ahead and make sure that we can still plug in our battery because that's really important. Looks like we can. The light is lighting up. So we are ready to start programming. So just as a once over, what we've got so far, we've got a frame, electronics, and some motion right here on our motors. This assembly should be really pretty sturdy, and we're kind of set up to program. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our USB cable, going to untwist the twisty tie, whatever you call them. It's kind of a funny name. Let's see if I have any USB ports left open. I guess not. So we're going to lose this camera, and I'm going to go back to my main camera, and I'll go ahead and share my screen for now. Actually, I'll show one more. So I'm going to unplug. The Arduino right there, and we're going to plug in our USB cable right into the port right there. So that should be plugged in. All is well. We're going to take the other end and we're going to plug it into our computer. So I'm going to unplug my camera so that I can plug this in, but I'm going to share my screen. All right. So I'm plugging in the Arduino. And next, I'll share my screen. Let me get this set up. All right. All right, so you should see my screen now. So what you see here is the Arduino IDE. IDE stands for Integrated Development Environment. Fancy term that we don't really need to know right now. Basically, this is where you program the robot. Arduino Create is what this one is called. It's free to use. It's all online. I think there's certain computers that it might not work with, but for most things, it should work just fine. So actually, we're just going to go to our sketchbook. And I'm going to make a new sketch. So the basics of Arduino Create, and I can send a link to this in a little bit. You've got a sketchbook of all of your programs right here, and I've got kind of a few different ones. You've got your code. You can select and upload boards, upload code here. But you also have some other stuff on the side. So we've got some examples and libraries. So the way Arduino works is it has a collection of programming libraries that essentially unlock different kinds of like functions that it can do. So a library is just kind of like a bunch of code packaged together so that you don't have to rewrite it. So like programming the robot, on the lower level, there's a lot of different stuff that goes into making it work. By writing libraries, we kind of abstract that so you can just kind of worry about the higher level stuff. So basically it just makes it easier. So if we click on libraries, you'll see there's a bunch of different libraries that you can choose from. And I'm going to show you the one that we developed specifically for Moorbot. So my computer is kind of slow sometimes, so it might take a second. There we go. So here's all the libraries. There's a bunch of different ones, everything from Alexa, Alibaba, just all kinds of stuff. But what we're going to search is Moorbot. So capital M-O-R-E, I misspelled it, Moorbot. And here you're going to find Moorbot library. So we can go ahead and include that. But what we're going to do is go to the examples. So we're going to drop in these examples. And these are all example code that we've written to help you get started with Moorbot. I'm going to start with Moorbot. Let's see. I'm trying to think. Rex, you think Moorbot motors or drive is going to be easier? Drive. Drive. All right. We'll start with drive. Rex, you can't see him off screen, but he is our CTO and wrote our library. So he lives and breathes this thing. So anyways, I click on this library and it pulls up the code on the side. And it's a pretty short program. We're going to break it down in just a second. But you know, the main stuff that we're going to be working with is right in here. So if you try to type or change anything, it will automatically create a new program. So I'm just going to do that. And it's going to ask me if I want to make something. So I'm going to, it's going to ask if you want to save it. I'm going to go ahead and save this as Zipline Robot. And it'll create that code. All right, so here's this code in my sketchbook. I'm going to go ahead and close this so I can see things better. And let's just go ahead and break this down. So I'm going to delete that little thing that I made. So at the top here, we have something that says hashtag include moorbot.h. So that is including the library. And somebody mentioned on the YouTube comments that it's a set of predefined variables and functions. Yes, that's a great way to phrase it. So that's kind of like our toolbox that we're going to be using the rest of it. Next, we have this line that says moorbot. And then in parentheses, it's got 1 and 4. Basically what that is doing is telling the library, hey, I've got a robot here, and it's got motors plugged into port 1 and 4. Now, we only plugged a motor into port 4, but you could also have plugged a motor into port 1. And these are things that you can change. So there's 4 ports, so you could have 2 and 3 here, and you can just kind of redefine this how you want. So next we have something that says void setup. So there's 2 major parts of an Arduino program after you get past all this top stuff. There's the setup loop, and then there's the loop. And setup basically runs code once. So when the robot is reading this code, it's going to read it line by line. So it's going to look at what's on line 8. It says bot.setup. It's going to do that. Then it's going to do the next thing. And then when it gets to the end, it's just going to be done. It's just going to leave. And it'll go straight to the loop. So now with the loop, it does that, but it does it in a loop. So it's going to do things at once. So if I had thing 1, and then thing 2, and the little double slashes there are comments, it basically means the robot is going to ignore that code, or the Arduino rather, which is nice for like writing things so that us people can understand it. Anyways, so in the loop, it's just going to go thing 1, then thing 2, then thing 3, and then just start all over again and go thing 1 and thing 2 and thing 3. So it's going to do that forever. But we don't want to do that just yet. Right now, let's just talk about how to get this moving. So the very top, let's go back to this void setup loop. And what we care about here is we've got to make sure we have this bot.setup. So it's just like it says here, it's connecting it to the motor, it's getting everything set up, ready for you to use. Next, we have something that says bot.forward. Now, normally, when you're using this library, we have a little robot that drives around. It's 2 wheels. Yes, so somebody commented thing, aka command. Yes, so when I say thing there, what I mean is it's kind of like a command. So it could be the Arduino is printing something. It could be it's reading a sensor value. It's just some kind of thing. Just like this. So this is a command that we can use. So bot.forward would normally drive the robot forward at 80% speed. But we only have 1 motor right now. So really what it's going to do is make the wheel go forward at 80% speed. So let's go ahead and change this number up just a little bit. I'm going to make this maybe 40%, just so it doesn't go super fast, because I don't have a long zip line. I just have this tiny little one above my chair. Next, we have the statement that says delay 1000. So what this is doing is telling the robot to not do anything else for 1000 milliseconds. Now, there are 1000 milliseconds in 1 second, so this really means just stop for 1 second. So that means whatever it's doing above it, it's going to do that for a whole second. So if I change this to 500, that means that it will do exactly what's above that for half a second. Next, we have this line that says bot.stop, and it does what it kind of sounds like. It just stops all the motors. You want to make sure that's at the end of things. Otherwise, it would just keep moving. So we have our code. Next, what we need to do is actually upload it. So we're going to make sure that our robot is connected. We're going to click this, and it's going to ask us to select a board. We're going to select the Arduino/Shinwino 101. We're going to say OK, and it's going to look for it. Let's see if we can find it. Maybe that wasn't the right one. Oh, here we go. That should work, but also Arduino Uno is the one we want. I was wrong. All right, so now, one other thing that I forgot to mention. When you're getting set up with Arduino Create, so I didn't show this because it was already set up, you have to have the Arduino plugin installed. So it's actually, so if I try to upload this, it'll give me an error. So what I'm going to do, let's see, I might have it like readily available. Probably not. Yeah, so let's go to this. So we're just going to Google Arduino Create plugin. And this basically is what allows your browser to talk to the Arduino. And it's going to walk us through setting that up. So we'll do that. All right. It's going to ask me if I want to install it. I'm going to say yes. You can trust Arduino. They've been around for a really long time. They're great. All right. So we're going to go next. And it said it should be good to go. So it's installing. All right, so while that's waiting, somebody mentioned in the comments that it'd be a good idea to change the comment right here from 80% to 40%, because that's what this is. Good catch. That's exactly right. So you could change this comment to 40%. So anytime there's this double slash line, anything after that, the Arduino is going to ignore. So if I deleted those, it's going to become darkened font, which means, hey, I'm reading this, but I don't know what that is. So I'm going to go ahead and comment it back out. If you want to check your code to make sure that it will compile, so compiling is just how the computer turns it into a language that the Arduino can understand. If I click verify right there, that check mark, it will compile it. So it'll say success. Now, if I went in and deleted these comments and did that same thing with throw an error, say drive is not declared in the scope. So it basically just can't make sense of what that is. So I'm just going to go add my comments. And there we go. So I have my plugin installed, and you can tell by seeing right here, it says Arduino Uno at COM9. So COM9 is just the port on your computer. It doesn't really matter too much what it says there, as long as it connects. And what I'm going to do is click on this upload arrow. So it'll tell me that it's uploading. And then it says done, thank you. So now what I'm going to do is turn back on my camera. Or stop sharing my screen, rather. Okay, here we go, moment of truth. So this is the first time that we're going to see if it works. So I'm going to take my zip line, kind of get it all set. I'm going to take my robot, and I'm going to put it on the zip line. All right. It's snapped in. So now the last thing to do is, I guess this is backwards to y'all, but I'm going to plug in the battery, and we'll see what happens. There we go. It moved. It worked. Cool stuff. So now we have the basics of making something that will work, and we can expand upon that. So now we're going to write a really simple program to make a drive, maybe go back and forth, and then we're going to write a loop that'll make it do things, and then that will be all. So we had the robot drive forward, 40% speed for half a second. Let's say that we wanted the robot to move all the way across and then all the way back. I'm going to go ahead and assume that this should be 1 second because it was able to draw about halfway across in that time frame. When you're using time delays to kind of control the movement, it's going to be a bit of a trial and error. So it's going to take some time to kind of figure out. So that's a part of the process. And this number is going to be probably different for everybody, depending on how far you're wanting it to go and like any kind of friction in the system. So it's just going to take some time. So let's say this drives it all the way across, and then I want to drive it all the way back. What I'm going to do is copy all of this code, and I'm going to hit Control-C. Make sure that works. So we're going to hit Control-C, and I'm just going to go down here and paste it. Now, right now, it says forward, but I want it to go backwards. So, oops. But I wanted to go backwards. So I'm going to change this line right here to just say backward. So bot.backward will, so bot.backwards will make the robot go back and delay it. So I'm going to go ahead and compile that, make sure all is well. It says success, so we're good to go and upload. So I'm going to plug the Arduino back in, and I'm going to go ahead and upload. Now, just a quick troubleshooting note. If when you plug it back in, it is disconnecting, it's probably because it's not getting enough power from your computer like it wants. So what that means is you need to just go ahead and plug the battery back in while you're uploading. So I'm going to go ahead and show this. All right. We've got our robot. I'm going to add it. I'm going to put it in right over here. All right. And I'm going to plug in my battery. We're going to see if this works. All right. Here we go. 3, 2, 1. It's plugged in. Goes all the way across and then comes back. So we noticed that it didn't go all the way. So I started right here, ended up about right here. So maybe I need to make a little bit longer than a second. And the other thing to notice is that it took a little bit longer. I didn't get as far backwards. That's because it had some momentum that it had to fight. So that's just something that you can kind of play with. I'm not going to go too much further. Oops. With playing around with that, but that works. So somebody in the comments on YouTube is jumping ahead. They know where we're going next. We're going to talk about loops. So let's say that we wanted the robot to do that forever, or at least until the battery died. It would be really annoying and take a lot of time to like copy and paste our code over and over again. So this is where a loop comes in. So sometimes you can use what's called a for loop. And that's kind of what the person in the comments was talking about. But Arduino already has a loop. So there's the setup loop, and then there's the loop. And we're just going to use the loop because it's going to run forever, and we don't have to write our own for loop. All right, so we're going to go back to the code. We're almost done. This is the last little thing we're going to do. And all that I'm going to do is copy and paste this. And all we're going to do is we're just going to capture the parts where it's driving. And I'm going to go ahead and paste that. So if we were the computer and we were reading this, and I'm going to go ahead and delete this from here. Oops, not all of it. So we can go and delete the bot.stop. We want to keep the bot.setup. So the setup loop needs to have bot.setup. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. So you got to make sure that's there. But next, we've got all this in the loop. And so let's just kind of read through it as if we were the computer. So first, we're going to see the robot is going to read bot.forward. It's going to turn the motor forward 40%. It's going to do that for a second. And it's going to see new command, bot.backwards. So it's going to do that. It's going to do that for a second. Then it's going to come right back at the stop. So somebody else commented that he would have first tested the motor without hanging on the zip line. That's probably a smarter way to do that. There's definitely times where when you're building something kind of complex like this, you want to test it in stages. With this, it's okay, but for a lot of things, that could be very useful. So is there a command that do ration counts? Yes, there is. So in the kit, there is an optical encoder, and the optical encoder allows you to essentially measure the distance traveled based on the diameter of the wheel. But we won't really get into that right now. We're pretty much running in on our time. So I'm going to go ahead and upload this code. And you'll see down here when it is successful. All right. So I'm going to unplug it from the computer. And I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. All right, here we go, final test. So I'm going to add the robot right up here. We're going to snap it back on, and we're going to plug it in. All right, here we go. All right, so it's going back and forth. It's kind of not staying where we want it to, is it? That's something that you kind of have to account for in the code. There's other things like counting revolutions that would help for that. But for now, we're going to say it's okay. And you can move this along too if you want and just pick it up. You're going to want to avoid back driving the motor. So that means that if it's trying to go one way, you're going to want to avoid kind of pushing it the other way. What I would suggest is picking it up and then moving from there. So I'm going to go ahead and unplug this and turn it off and take it off. So yeah, that is today's session. As far as resources go for doing more, you can find this kit in the Maker Shed. So I will send that in the chat. You can also find all of the tutorials and part files for this on MakerPlace. So here in the chat, I'm sending a course on MakerPlace that has all of the tutorials for building this. So that will kind of show you how to build the initial base robot, which is this two-wheeled robot that drives around. But as you get towards the end, it'll show you more programming things. And the next thing that I will show you or send is the starter kit. So this is the kit that we used today. Oh, and one more thing, I totally forgot. Our phone mount. So we built this phone mount last week using Onshape. And if we take our snap connectors, I'm going to go find my phone. So we made this mount, and it can attach a phone via rubber bands. I'm just going to add that really quickly. Perfect. So phone mount, cool stuff. We're going to go ahead and hang this up again. All right. And then what we're going to do is take our snap mounts and slip them on to the phone mount. And then we're going to snap that on the edge here. And it might push the battery just a little bit, but it should attach. And so it's a little bit off balance, but for the most part, it'll work and be fine. So yeah, this is just kind of an example of kind of the modularity of the platform and the ways that you can extend it. We also have just bulk parts that you could buy, and you can also 3D print these parts here. and they just snap onto the platform, and you can extend it and build bigger and better things. You can even build a drone. So you can build all kinds of cool things. I would love to see what you all create. So if you do end up getting a kit and building something, let us know. You can find our company on social media. We are More Technologies. Our website is moretech.co. And then if you want to keep seeing more awesome stuff like this, subscribe to Family Maker Camp and Make Magazine if you can. That's what supports all of this. So thank you all for watching so much. If you have any questions, I can always be reached at cannon@moretech.co. You can also find my address on our website. So thank you all. This has been really fun, and I hope you get to build something awesome.